Picture this, a quiet Tuesday evening in a small Texas town. An unassuming man in his 70s walks down Main Street, minding his own business. He's wearing simple jeans and a flannel shirt, nothing flashy. To most people, he looks like any other grandfather heading home after a peaceful day. But this isn't just any grandfather. This is Chuck Norris. When Officer Derek Martinez sees what he thinks is just another troublemaker refusing to comply with his orders, he makes a decision that will haunt him forever. He raises his baton and strikes. The sound echoes through the empty street like thunder before a storm. But what happens next? Well, that's when Derek realizes he's just made the biggest mistake of his entire career. Some people walk softly and carry a big stick. Others don't need to carry anything at all. This is the story of what happens when raw power meets quiet strength, when arrogance collides with wisdom, and when a young officer learns that the most dangerous people are often the ones who have absolutely nothing to prove. Chuck Norris had always believed that retirement would be peaceful. After decades of action films, martial arts championships, and being an internet legend, he'd settled into the quiet rhythm of small-town life in Walker, Texas. At 73, he spent his mornings tending to his garden, his afternoons reading philosophy, and his evenings taking long walks through the town he'd grown to love. The people of Walker knew him, of course, but they respected his desire for normalcy. When Chuck walked down Main Street, folks would nod politely, maybe exchange a few words about the weather, but they never made a big fuss. That's exactly how he liked it. Chuck had learned long ago that true strength wasn't about proving yourself to others. It was about inner peace, about knowing who you are without needing the world's validation. His white beard had grown thick, his hair had thinned, and his movements had slowed just enough to make him look like any other senior citizen enjoying his golden years. But appearances, as they say, can be deceiving. Officer Derek Martinez was 28 years old and had been on the Walker Police Department for exactly 18 months. He was the kind of cop who watched too many action movies and read too many stories about police heroics. Derek believed that respect came from fear, that authority meant never backing down, and that every interaction was a test of his dominance. Tonight, Derek was feeling particularly aggressive. He'd been passed over for a promotion earlier that week, and his supervisor had suggested he needed to work on his people skills. The criticism stung because Derek prided himself on being a hard-nosed officer who didn't take any nonsense from anyone. When Derek spotted the elderly man walking alone on Main Street at 9 p.m., something immediately rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe it was the man's confident posture, or the way he seemed completely unafraid, despite being alone in the dark. Derek's instincts, honed by too many hours of aggressive police training videos, told him this was suspicious behavior. Derek pulled his patrol car over and stepped out, his hand already resting on his baton. "Hey, you there!" Derek called out, his voice carrying the artificial authority of someone trying too hard to sound intimidating. Chuck turned slowly, his expression calm and patient. "Good evening, officer. How can I help you?" The politeness in Chuck's voice somehow made Derek even more irritated. In his experience, people were either scared of police or hostile toward them. This quiet confidence felt like disrespect. "What are you doing out here so late?" Derek demanded, stepping closer. "Just taking my evening walk," Chuck replied simply. "I live about 6 blocks from here. Beautiful night for it." Derek studied the older man's face, searching for signs of deception. He didn't find any, but that only frustrated him more. "I'm going to need to see some identification." Chuck reached slowly into his back pocket, but Derek's paranoia kicked into overdrive. "Whoa, keep your hands where I can see them." "I'm just getting my wallet, officer," Chuck said, his voice still eerily calm. "You asked for identification." "Turn around and put your hands on the wall," Derek shouted, pointing to the brick building beside them. For the first time, Chuck hesitated. His eyes narrowed slightly, and those who knew him well would have recognized this as a warning sign. But Derek wasn't paying attention to warning signs. He was too caught up in his own power trip. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong," Chuck said quietly. "I'm just an old man taking a walk." "Are you resisting arrest?" Derek's hand moved to his baton. "Turn around now." Chuck's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 40 years of martial arts training had taught him to read body language, to sense intention, to recognize when a situation was about to turn dangerous. Every instinct he'd honed through decades of competition and conflict was now screaming at him that this young officer was about to make a terrible mistake. "Officer," Chuck said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "I think you might want to reconsider your approach here." But Derek heard only defiance. Without another word, Derek yanked his baton from his belt and swung it hard across Chuck's shoulder blade. The impact made a sickening thud that echoed off the empty buildings. Derek expected to see the old man crumple, to cry out, to finally show the fear and submission that Derek felt was his due. Instead, Chuck didn't even flinch. The baton had struck solid muscle and bone, but Chuck absorbed the blow like it was nothing more than a gentle tap. He turned slowly to face Derek, and for the first time, the young officer saw something in those steel blue eyes that made his blood turn to ice water. "Son," Chuck said, his voice still quiet but now carrying an unmistakable edge, "you just made a very serious mistake." Derek's bravado evaporated instantly. There was something about the way Chuck stood, the way he moved, the absolute certainty in his voice that triggered every survival instinct Derek possessed. This wasn't just an angry senior citizen. This was something else entirely. Derek raised the baton again, but now his hands were shaking. "Stay back! I'm warning you!" Chuck took a single step forward, and Derek felt like he was facing down a mountain that had suddenly decided to walk. "Do you know who I am?" Chuck asked, his voice still barely above a whisper. Derek's mouth went dry. Something about the man's face was familiar, but panic was making it hard to think clearly. I don't... My name is Chucknorris." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. The baton slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered to the pavement. Chucknorris. The Chucknorris. Six-time world karate champion. The man who'd made a career out of being unstoppable. The living legend who'd inspired 1,000 internet memes about his supposed invincibility. And Derek had just hit him with a baton. "Oh God," Derek whispered. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Chuck's expression softened slightly. The rage that had been building behind his eyes faded, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. "Son, I want you to understand something. I didn't tell you my name to threaten you. I told you my name so you'd understand why what you just did was so dangerous." Derek was hyperventilating now. His career was over. His life was over. Chuck Norris was going to destroy him with his bare hands, and Derek was going to deserve every second of it. But Chuck didn't attack. Instead, he bent down and picked up Derek's baton, weighing it thoughtfully in his hands. "This is a weapon," Chuck said conversationally. "You used it against an innocent person who was doing nothing but taking a walk. Do you understand what that means?" Derek could only nod, tears starting to form in his eyes. "It means," Chuck continued, "that you're not ready to carry this responsibility." With a casual motion that seemed to defy physics, Chuck bent the steel baton into a perfect pretzel shape and handed it back to Derek. Derek stared at the twisted metal, his mind unable to process what he'd just witnessed. The baton had been regulation police equipment, designed to withstand enormous amounts of force. Chuck had bent it like it was made of clay. "I'm not going to hurt you," Chuck said, his voice gentle now, "but I am going to teach you something." Chuck pulled out his wallet and showed Derek his identification, along with several other cards that made Derek's eyes widen. Honorary police badges from 6 different states, a card identifying him as a consultant for the FBI, a Texas Ranger commission signed by the governor himself. "I've worked with law enforcement my entire life," Chuck explained. "I've trained thousands of officers. I've helped develop police protocols. And in all that time, I've learned one thing above all others. The badge doesn't make you powerful. Character makes you powerful." Derek was sobbing now, the full weight of his mistake crushing down on him. He'd assaulted a legend, a man who'd dedicated his life to making the world safer and better. "I'm sorry," Derek choked out. "I'm so sorry." Chuck placed a gentle hand on the young officer's shoulder. "I know you are, and that's why I'm not going to press charges." Derek looked up in shock. "You're... what?" "I'm not going to press charges," Chuck repeated, "but I am going to make you a deal." Chuck explained that Derek would resign from the Walker Police Department the next morning. But instead of ending his law enforcement career entirely, Derek would spend the next 6 months training with Chuck personally. He would learn what it really meant to serve and protect. He would discover the difference between authority and authoritarianism, between strength and bullying. Power without wisdom is just violence waiting to happen, Chuck told him. But wisdom without power is just philosophy. You need both, son, and right now, you have neither. 3 years later, Derek Martinez graduated from the Texas State Police Academy with the highest honors in his class. He went on to become one of the most respected officers in the state, known for his compassion, his de-escalation skills, and his absolute commitment to justice over ego. He still carries the twisted baton in his patrol car, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. A reminder that true strength comes from restraint, that real power lies in protecting the innocent, and that the most dangerous people are often the ones who look the most harmless. Chuck Norris returned to his quiet retirement, content in the knowledge that he'd changed one young man's life without throwing a single punch. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's turning them into allies. The night he was struck by a police baton, Chuck Norris could have ended a career with his fists. Instead, he chose to build one with his wisdom, and that, perhaps, is the most Chuck Norris thing of all. Remember, those who are truly strong never need to prove it. The loudest voices are usually the emptiest, and the most dangerous storms are often the quietest ones.